Have you ever noticed that every time you're finally alone, actually alone with no one to talk to and nothing to distract you, you immediately reach for your phone, turn on the TV, put in your headphones, do anything to fill the silence because being alone with yourself feels unbearable? You know exactly what I'm talking about. That uncomfortable feeling when there's no one around, that anxiety when you have to eat alone at a restaurant, that panic when your friends cancel plans and you're left with an empty evening, that terror of being by yourself with nothing but your own thoughts. So you scroll. You text people you don't even want to talk to. You watch shows you don't care about. You create noise, any noise, to avoid the one thing you fear most, being alone with yourself. And society reinforces this fear constantly. You're told that success means networking, that happiness means having lots of friends, that a full social calendar means you're winning at life, that being alone means you're lonely, isolated, a loser, that extroverts are successful and introverts are broken, that you need people, need connection, need to be constantly surrounded by others or something is wrong with you. So you force yourself to be social even when you don't want to. You go to events that drain you. You maintain friendships that feel empty. You say yes to invitations out of obligation. You stay in relationships that don't fulfill you because being alone feels worse. You fill every moment with people, with noise, with distraction, and you call this living. You call this success. You call this happiness. But inside, you're exhausted, completely drained. You feel like you're performing constantly, wearing a mask, being who everyone else needs you to be. You have 1,000 acquaintances, but no one who really knows you. You're surrounded by people but feel completely alone. You're constantly connected but profoundly disconnected from yourself. And you think something is wrong with you. You think you're broken. You think you're not doing it right. But what if you're not broken? What if society is lying to you? What if everything you've been taught about needing people, about needing constant connection, about needing to be social, is actually destroying the very thing that makes you exceptional? What if the path to genius, to creativity, to depth, to becoming truly yourself, requires the exact opposite of what everyone is telling you to do? This is what Arthur Schopenhauer, one of the most brilliant and misunderstood philosophers who ever lived, discovered. And it's going to make you uncomfortable. It's going to contradict everything you believe. It's going to challenge every social norm you've internalized, but it's also going to liberate you. Because Schopenhauer understood something that modern society desperately doesn't want you to know. Solitude isn't a curse, it's a gift. And the people who achieve greatness, who create genius, who become truly themselves, aren't the ones with the biggest social circles. They're the ones brave enough to be alone. Let me tell you what Schopenhauer saw, what he understood about human nature that most people never learn. He saw that most people are afraid of being alone, not because being alone is painful, but because being alone forces them to face themselves. And most people can't handle what they see. Most people have built their entire identity around other people's opinions, other people's validation, other people's approval. Take away the audience and they don't know who they are. Remove the mirror of social interaction and they have no reflection, and that terrifies them. So they avoid solitude at all costs. They fill every moment with social interaction. They make themselves constantly available. They pride themselves on being social butterflies, on having huge networks, on never being alone. And Schopenhauer looked at these people and said, these are not the great ones. These are not the thinkers. These are not the creators. These are the ordinary masses, living ordinary lives, thinking ordinary thoughts, never becoming anything more than a reflection of the crowd around them. He wrote, "A man can be himself only so long as he is alone, and if he does not love solitude, he will not love freedom, for it is only when he is alone that he is really free." Read that again. Really read it. A man can be himself only so long as he is alone. Not sometimes himself, not partially himself, only himself when alone. Because every other person you're with, you're performing, you're adjusting, you're accommodating, you're being who they need you to be. And in that performance, you lose yourself. Think about it. Really think about it. When was the last time you were completely yourself? Not performing, not adjusting, not trying to be liked or impressive or acceptable. When was the last time you expressed a thought without calculating how it would be received? When was the last time you did something purely because you wanted to, not because it would look good or impress someone or maintain an image? When were you last actually free to be yourself? For most people, the answer is never. Or maybe when they were children, before they learned to perform, before they learned to adjust, before they understood that being yourself gets you rejected. So they learned to hide, to perform, to become what others want. And they've been performing so long, they don't even know who they are underneath the mask anymore. The performance has become their identity. And being alone, without an audience, without someone to perform for, feels like death. But Schopenhauer discovered that this performance, this constant social adjustment, this need for others, is precisely what kills genius. Because genius requires original thought. Creativity requires authenticity. Depth requires introspection. And none of those things can happen when you're constantly accommodating other people's presence, other people's opinions, other people's expectations. You can't think original thoughts when you're too busy thinking about what others think. You can't create authentically when you're worried about how it will be received. You can't go deep when you're skimming the surface to stay socially acceptable. Every great thinker, every great artist, every great creator, every person who changed the world did so in solitude. Not because they hated people, but because they understood that greatness requires going where the crowd won't follow. It requires thinking thoughts the masses can't understand. It requires becoming someone who no longer fits the mold. And you can't do that while trying to fit in. You can't become exceptional while trying to be normal. You can't achieve greatness while seeking approval from people committed to mediocrity. Schopenhauer himself lived this. He was known as a misanthrope, a loner, someone who avoided social gatherings. People called him antisocial, difficult, arrogant, but he didn't care. He understood something they didn't, that their approval was worthless, that their opinions were just reflections of the crowd's opinions, that seeking validation from the masses was seeking validation from mediocrity. So he withdrew. He spent his days alone, reading, thinking, writing, and he produced some of the most profound philosophy ever written. But here's what modern society has done. Here's the lie they've sold you. They've convinced you that solitude is loneliness, that being alone means being lonely, that if you're not constantly surrounded by people, something is wrong with you. They've pathologized introversion. They've made solitude seem like a disease that needs to be cured. They've created a world where being alone is seen as failure, as sadness, as something to be avoided at all costs. And why? Why does society push this so hard? Because people who are comfortable in solitude are dangerous. People who don't need constant validation are uncontrollable. People who can think for themselves don't follow the crowd. People who are complete without others don't consume products promising connection. People who enjoy their own company don't need the constant distraction, the constant consumption, the constant performance that society profits from. So they sell you connection. They sell you networking events and social media and constant availability. They sell you the lie that you need people to be happy, to be successful, to be whole. And you buy it. You exhaust yourself trying to maintain a social life you don't even want. You drain yourself being available to people who don't truly know you. You sacrifice your depth for breadth. You trade quality for quantity. You give up solitude, give up freedom, give up yourself for the approval of people who aren't even paying attention. And the result? You're miserable. You're exhausted. You're disconnected from yourself. You have no idea who you are because you've spent so much time being who everyone else needs you to be. You have no original thoughts because you've spent all your time consuming other people's thoughts. You have no depth because you've spent all your energy skimming surfaces. You're a shell, a performance, a reflection of everyone around you, and deep down you know it. Now, if you're finding value in this content, if what I'm sharing is resonating with you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because every video, I'm bringing you profound philosophical insights like this that challenge what society teaches you and show you the path to actually becoming yourself. Let me tell you what happens when you embrace solitude. When you stop running from being alone. When you stop filling every moment with people and noise and distraction. When you finally courageously sit with yourself. At first, it's uncomfortable. Deeply uncomfortable. Because you're facing everything you've been avoiding. All the thoughts you've been suppressing. All the feelings you've been numbing. All the questions you've been dodging. All the parts of yourself you've been hiding. You'll want to run. You'll want to grab your phone. Call someone. Turn on the TV. Create noise. The silence will feel oppressive. Your own thoughts will feel overwhelming. Being alone with yourself will feel like torture. And this is where most people give up. They decide solitude isn't for them. They go back to their social performance. They return to the noise. They choose comfortable distraction over uncomfortable truth. But if you stay, if you sit with the discomfort, if you allow yourself to actually be alone, something remarkable happens. The noise in your head starts to settle. The performance starts to drop. The masks start to come off. And underneath all of that, underneath all the social conditioning and expectations and performances, you start to find yourself, your actual self, not the version you perform for others, but who you actually are. And this is terrifying, because what if who you actually are isn't acceptable? What if your real thoughts are too weird, too dark, too different? What if your authentic self is someone people won't like? This is the fear that keeps most people performing forever. The fear that if they stop accommodating others, if they stop being socially acceptable, they'll be rejected, they'll be alone, they'll be unloved. But Schopenhauer understood something crucial. You're already alone. You've always been alone. Being surrounded by people who don't know the real you is lonelier than actual solitude. Performing for an audience that doesn't care about you is more isolating than being by yourself. You think you're avoiding loneliness by staying social, but you're actually creating it, because you're lonely for yourself. You're disconnected from the one person you can never escape. You. Schopenhauer wrote, "Ordinary people think merely how they will spend their time. A person of intellect tries to use it." Most people use social interaction as a way to kill time, to avoid boredom, to escape themselves. They fill their calendars with social obligations not because these interactions are meaningful, but because the alternative, being alone, feels worse. They're using people as distractions, using relationships as escapes, using constant connection as avoidance. But people of intellect, people of genius, people who actually create something meaningful, they see time differently. They see solitude differently. For them, being alone isn't something to avoid. It's the most valuable state they can achieve, because solitude is where the work happens, where the thinking happens, where the creating happens, where they become who they're meant to become. Think about every great work of art, every breakthrough discovery, every revolutionary idea. Where did it come from? Not from a networking event, not from a party, not from constant social interaction. It came from someone alone in a room, thinking deeply, working intensely, creating without distraction. It came from solitude, from freedom, from someone brave enough to be alone with their thoughts until something extraordinary emerged. But you can't do this if you're afraid of being alone. You can't create genius if you're constantly seeking approval. You can't think original thoughts if you're worried about being socially acceptable. You can't go deep if you're always skating on the surface of social performance. Genius requires solitude, not occasional solitude, not reluctant solitude, but embraced, chosen, protected solitude. And here's what society doesn't want you to know. You don't need as many people as you think you need. You don't need a huge social circle. You don't need to be constantly available. You don't need to maintain shallow friendships out of obligation. You don't need to be at every event. You don't need to respond to every message immediately. You don't need to perform constantly. You need maybe 3 or 4 people who actually know you, who see you, who allow you to be yourself. And beyond that, you need solitude. You need space. You need freedom. Schopenhauer said, "The more unintelligent a man is, the less mysterious existence seems to him." You know what he means by this? Unintelligent people don't question. They don't think deeply. They don't wonder. They just accept what society tells them, what the crowd believes, what everyone else is doing. And existence seems simple to them because they never examine it. They're too busy being social, being distracted, being part of the crowd to ever stop and actually think. But people of intelligence, people of depth, people who create genius, they question everything. And that questioning requires solitude. It requires stepping away from the crowd's answers long enough to formulate your own questions. It requires being alone with existence long enough to find it mysterious, profound, worthy of deep examination. You can't do that at a party. You can't do that while networking. You can't do that while performing for others. Let me show you what this looks like practically. You have a weekend coming up. Society tells you that you should make plans, that you should see friends, that you should be social, that staying home alone all weekend means you're a loser, you're depressed, something's wrong with you. So even if you're exhausted, even if you desperately need time alone, you make plans. You force yourself to be social. You perform. And you come back Monday more drained than you left Friday. But what if you didn't? What if you protected that weekend? What if you said no to all social obligations and spent it alone? At first, it feels wrong. It feels like you're missing out, like you're wasting time, like you should be doing something. But if you stay with it, if you allow yourself to actually be alone, something shifts. The frantic energy calms, the performance drops. The real you starts to emerge, and in that space, in that solitude, you start to have thoughts you've never had time to think, ideas you've never had space to develop, feelings you've never had room to feel. You start to know yourself in a way that's impossible when you're constantly around others. You start to like yourself, to enjoy your own company, to prefer your own thoughts to the shallow chatter of social performance. You start to understand what Schopenhauer meant, that solitude isn't loneliness, it's freedom. But most people never experience this. Most people are so addicted to constant connection, so afraid of being alone, so dependent on external validation that they never discover who they actually are. They live their entire lives as a performance. They die without ever knowing themselves. They mistake the mask for the face. And they wonder why, despite being surrounded by people, they feel so profoundly alone. Schopenhauer also said, "We forfeit 3/4 of ourselves in order to be like other people." 3/4. Think about that. You're sacrificing 75% of who you actually are to fit in, to be accepted, to be socially appropriate. You're trading your authentic self for a diluted version that won't make waves, won't cause problems, won't stand out too much. You're making yourself smaller, duller, more ordinary in exchange for the comfort of belonging to a crowd you don't even respect. And for what? For approval from people who are doing the same thing? For connection with people who don't know the real you? For belonging to a group that would reject you if they knew who you actually were? You're sacrificing 3/4 of yourself for acceptance from people you're not even being authentic with. You're trading your depth for their shallow approval, and you're calling this success. You're calling this happiness. You're calling this life. But it's not life. It's performance. It's hiding. It's slow suicide of the soul. Real life, actual life, the kind of life where you're fully alive and fully yourself, that only happens in solitude. That only happens when you stop performing. That only happens when you're brave enough to be alone, to face yourself, to discover who you are underneath all the social conditioning. And here's the beautiful paradox Schopenhauer discovered. When you embrace solitude, when you become comfortable being alone, when you develop a rich inner life, you become far more interesting to be around. Not because you're trying to be interesting, but because you have depth, you have original thoughts, you have substance. You're not just reflecting the crowd's opinions back at them, you're offering something real, something authentic, something that came from actual introspection rather than social mimicry. The people who are most magnetic, most fascinating, most worth knowing are not the social butterflies who know everyone. They're the people who know themselves. They're the ones who've spent enough time in solitude to develop actual thoughts, actual perspectives, actual depth. They're the ones who don't need constant validation because they're validated from within. They're the ones who aren't performing because they've stopped caring about the crowd's approval. Think about the people you actually admire, the writers, the artists, the thinkers, the creators who've changed your life. Are they social butterflies? Are they constantly networking? Are they at every party? No, they're usually somewhat solitary. They protect their time, they guard their solitude, they understand that their work, their genius, their contribution to the world doesn't come from social interaction. It comes from the deep work they do alone. But you've been taught the opposite. You've been taught that success requires networking, that you need to know people, that it's all about who you know, and there's some truth to that in terms of career advancement, in terms of opportunities. But Schopenhauer isn't talking about career success. He's talking about genius, about depth, about becoming actually exceptional rather than just professionally successful. And those are not the same thing. You can be professionally successful by networking, by being social, by maintaining shallow connections with powerful people. But you can't be a genius that way. You can't create profound work that way. You can't develop original thoughts that way. You can't become truly exceptional that way. Because exceptional requires being different. And you can't be different while trying to fit in. You can't be original while copying the crowd. You can't stand out while blending in. Schopenhauer himself was professionally unsuccessful for most of his life. His lectures had no students. His books didn't sell. He was ignored, dismissed, rejected by the academic establishment. Why? Because he thought differently. Because he refused to conform to the accepted philosophical trends of his time. Because he valued truth over approval. And he could only do that because he was comfortable in solitude. Because he didn't need the crowd's validation. Because he was secure enough in himself to be himself, regardless of whether anyone appreciated it. And what happened? Eventually, decades later, people recognized his genius. His work is now considered foundational to Western philosophy. The academics who rejected him are forgotten. The crowd that ignored him has disappeared, but his ideas remain. His work endures. His solitude produced something the social butterflies of his era never could: timeless genius. This is what solitude creates. Not just genius in the sense of intellectual brilliance, though it creates that too, but genius in the sense of originality, authenticity, depth, substance, the courage to be yourself, regardless of whether it's socially acceptable, the freedom to think your own thoughts, regardless of whether the crowd agrees, the capacity to create something meaningful, regardless of whether it's popular. And you can't achieve any of that while you're performing for others. You can't be original while seeking approval. You can't be authentic while adjusting to others' expectations. You can't be free while enslaved to social validation. You have to withdraw. You have to embrace solitude. You have to become comfortable being alone, not sometimes, not reluctantly, but regularly, intentionally, protectively. So let me ask you directly, when was the last time you spent a full day alone? Not because you had to, not because you were between social obligations, but by choice, intentionally, protecting that time from any social intrusion. When did you last prioritize solitude over social performance? When did you last choose being alone with yourself over being distracted by others? For most people, the answer is never, or maybe years ago. Because society has convinced you that choosing solitude is selfish, antisocial, wrong, that you should always be available, always say yes, always make time for others, even when you're exhausted, even when you desperately need space, even when being social is draining the life out of you. You force yourself to perform because you've been taught that's what good people do. But Schopenhauer would ask, good for whom? Good for the people using you as distraction from their own emptiness? Good for the society that profits from your constant consumption of connection? Good for the crowd that wants you to stay mediocre like them? Because it's certainly not good for you. It's not good for your genius. It's not good for your creativity. It's not good for your authenticity. It's not good for your soul. Every hour you spend in obligatory social performance is an hour you're not spending developing yourself. Every evening you force yourself to be social, when you need solitude is an evening you're not thinking, creating, growing. Every weekend you fill with social obligations is a weekend you're not discovering who you are. You're trading your potential for other people's comfort. You're sacrificing your genius for social acceptance. And you're wondering why you feel unfulfilled. Schopenhauer said, "Talent hits a target no one else can hit. Genius hits a target no one else can see." You know why genius can see targets no one else can see? Because genius spends enough time in solitude to look beyond where the crowd is looking. Because genius isn't distracted by what everyone else is focused on. Because genius has the space, the silence, the freedom to perceive what others miss. And you can't develop that while you're performing in the crowd. You can only develop that alone. Think about what you could create, what you could become, what you could discover if you protected your solitude the way you protect your social obligations. If you valued time alone the way you value time with others. If you said yes to yourself as readily as you say yes to everyone else. If you invested in your inner life the way you invest in your social image. What could you become? What genius lies dormant inside you, suffocated by constant social performance? You'll never know if you don't try. If you don't embrace solitude, if you don't get comfortable being alone, if you don't stop running from yourself and start running toward yourself. And I know it's scary. I know it goes against everything you've been taught. I know it means risking people thinking you're antisocial, weird, difficult. But ask yourself, is their opinion more important than your genius? Is their approval more valuable than your authenticity? Is fitting in with the crowd more meaningful than becoming exceptional? Because you can't have both. You can't be extraordinary and fit in. You can't achieve genius and be socially acceptable. You can't become yourself and be what everyone else wants you to be. You have to choose, and most people choose the crowd. Most people choose performance. Most people choose comfortable mediocrity over uncomfortable excellence, and they spend their lives wondering why they feel so empty despite being so connected. But you don't have to make that choice. You can choose differently. You can choose solitude. You can choose freedom. You can choose to become who you actually are instead of who society wants you to be. You can choose genius over approval, depth over breadth, quality over quantity, yourself over the performance, but only if you're brave enough to be alone. Schopenhauer spent his life in relative solitude, and he produced some of the most profound philosophy ever written. Philosophy that challenged conventional thinking, that offered original insights, that changed how people understand existence, suffering, will, representation. He couldn't have done that while networking, while being social, while performing for the crowd. He could only do that in solitude, in freedom, in the space to think thoughts no one else was thinking. And you have that same potential, that same capacity for original thought, for creative genius, for profound depth. But you're suffocating it with constant social performance. You're drowning it in shallow connection. You're killing it with your addiction to being around people. Your genius is dying of neglect while you exhaust yourself maintaining relationships that don't feed your soul. So what are you going to do? Are you going to keep performing? Keep exhausting yourself being social? Keep sacrificing your depth for others' approval? Keep wondering why you feel empty despite being constantly connected? Or are you going to embrace solitude? Are you going to protect your time alone? Are you going to develop your inner life? Are you going to become comfortable being yourself? Are you going to choose genius over mediocrity? Because that's the choice. That's always the choice. The crowd or yourself. Performance or authenticity. Social approval or creative genius. Comfortable connection or uncomfortable depth. And most people choose wrong. Most people choose the crowd, choose performance, choose to stay small, stay acceptable, stay mediocre, because it's easier, because it's familiar, because being alone is scary. But the cost is everything. The cost is your potential, your genius, your authenticity, your freedom, your actual self. You're trading who you could become for the comfort of fitting in. You're sacrificing the masterpiece you could create for the approval of people who wouldn't appreciate it anyway. You're giving up your one chance at becoming truly exceptional for the safety of being ordinarily acceptable. And one day, you'll be old. You'll look back on your life, and you'll realize you spent it performing for an audience that's forgotten you. You spent it seeking approval from people who didn't matter. You spent it avoiding solitude, avoiding yourself, avoiding the very thing that could have made you exceptional. And you'll wonder, what could I have created if I'd been brave enough to be alone? What could I have become if I'd stopped performing? What genius died inside me because I was too afraid of solitude? Don't let that be your story. Don't let your genius die of neglect. Don't sacrifice your potential for others' comfort. Don't trade your authenticity for social acceptance. Choose solitude. Choose freedom. Choose yourself. Not sometimes, not reluctantly, but regularly, intentionally, protectively. Make time to be alone. Guard that time. Protect it like your life depends on it, because your real life, your authentic life, your genius life does depend on it. Start small if you need to. One evening, a week alone. One weekend a month in solitude. Gradually increase it as you become more comfortable, as you start to discover who you are, as you start to enjoy your own company, as you start to prefer your own thoughts to shallow social chatter, as you start to create, to think, to become. And watch what happens. Watch how your depth increases, how your thoughts clarify, how your creativity flows, how you become more yourself and less a performance. This is Schopenhauer's discovery. This is what he's trying to teach you. Solitude isn't loneliness. It's not isolation. It's not failure. It's freedom. It's the space where genius is born. It's the container for authentic becoming. It's the only place where you can be completely yourself. And being yourself, developing yourself, becoming exceptional, that's not selfish. That's not antisocial. That's the most important work you can do for yourself, for the world, for the potential genius dying inside you. So stop running from solitude. Stop filling every moment with people and noise and distraction. Stop performing. Stop seeking approval from people who don't know you. Stop sacrificing your depth for breadth. Stop choosing comfortable mediocrity over uncomfortable genius. Embrace solitude, protect it, value it, use it. Let it transform you from someone who fits in to someone who stands out, from someone who performs to someone who creates, from someone ordinary to someone exceptional. Schopenhauer showed you the way. He lived it. He proved it works. Now it's your turn. Now you have to choose the crowd or yourself, performance or authenticity, comfortable connection or transformative solitude. What will you choose? And will you choose it today, right now, this moment? Or will you keep performing until your genius dies and you become just another ordinary person, wondering what could have been? The choice is yours. The solitude is waiting. Your genius is waiting. Your authentic self is waiting. The only question is, are you brave enough to be alone? Are you strong enough to stop performing? Are you committed enough to choose your genius over their approval? Because that's what it takes. That's what Schopenhauer discovered. That's what creates genius, solitude, freedom, the courage to be alone, the strength to be yourself, the wisdom to value depth over approval. If this changed how you see solitude, if it made you reconsider your relationship with being alone, if it showed you a path to becoming exceptional instead of staying ordinary, then do something with it. Like this video so more people can discover Schopenhauer's wisdom. Share it with someone who's exhausted from constant performance, who's craving solitude but afraid to embrace it. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because next week I'm bringing you another profound philosophical insight that will challenge everything society taught you and show you how to actually become yourself. Your genius is waiting in solitude. The question is, will you finally be brave enough to find it?